Picture this, 130 kilometers southwest of Sydney, surrounded by rolling farmland, sits a structure that looks like it was designed by someone who studied medieval dungeons and maximum security Black Sea. Goulburn Supermax isn't just a prison, it's a human storage facility for the 40 most dangerous men in Australia. In Goulburn Supermax, there's nothing, just the hum of ventilation and your own thoughts eating you alive. One former inmate described it like this: it's like being buried alive. Except you can't die, but the psychological warfare goes deeper. Everything operates on a system designed to remove autonomy. You don't choose when to eat, sleep, shower, or see daylight. The prison chooses for you, day after day, month after month, year after year. Former psychologist Dr. Sarah Mitchell, who evaluated inmates there, said something chilling: Goulburn Supermax doesn't rehabilitate, it warehouses. And what comes out the other end isn't more human, it's less. So who deserves this treatment? Who are the men locked in these cells? That's where this story gets truly disturbing. Let me introduce you to some of Goulburn's most notorious residents. Ivan Milat spent his final years here. The backpacker murder. 7 young tourists tortured and killed in the Belanglo State Forest. When he arrived at Goulburn, he was already serving 7 life sentences, but even in maximum security, Milat was a problem. He'd assault guards, craft weapons from anything he could find. He went on hunger strikes, swallowed razor blades, and cut off his own finger with a plastic knife just to manipulate the system. Guards said Milat treated Supermax like a game, a challenge. He'd study their routines, looking for weaknesses, even from solitary confinement. He was plotting when he died of cancer in 2019. Some guards admitted they felt relief, not sadness, relief. Then there's Bassam Hamzy, founder of the Brothers for Life gang. Hamzy did something most criminals can't. He built a criminal empire from inside prison, using smuggled phones, encrypted messages, and corrupted visitors. He orchestrated murders, drug deals, and gang warfare across Sydney. In 2009, while locked in Goulburn Supermax, Hamzy ordered a hit that killed an innocent bystander. He didn't pull the trigger, he just made a call, and someone died. That's the level of power we're talking about. Prison officials have spent years trying to cut off Hamzy's communication. They've banned visitors, monitored every call, strip-searched him constantly. But here's what's terrifying: intelligence suggests he's still running operations. Even from the most secure cell in Australia, he finds a way. Abdul Nasser Benbrika is another resident, the Islamic extremist who planned mass casualty terrorist attacks in Melbourne, bombing the MCG during the 2005 AFL Grand Final, bombing Crown Casino. His plan could have killed hundreds, maybe thousands. When police raided his home, they found materials for explosives, jihadist propaganda, and detailed plans. Benbrika was radicalizing young men, turning them into weapons. And even after his arrest, he kept trying from prison. Guards caught him attempting to recruit other inmates to his ideology. That's why he's in Goulburn Supermax, because even behind bars, his words are dangerous. Instant coffee. The inmate eats alone. Always alone. The food slot closes with a metallic clang, then nothing. For the next 22 hours, there's nothing but time. Some inmates read. Books are allowed, but they're screened for violent content, escape techniques, anything that could be considered dangerous. Some write letters, though every word is read by staff before it leaves the prison. Most just sit and think. And that's when the real punishment begins. Dr. Craig Haney, a psychologist who studied solitary confinement, found something disturbing. Prolonged isolation creates what he calls shoe syndrome, a collection of psychiatric symptoms that include hallucinations, paranoia, and cognitive deterioration. Around 9 o'clock a.m., recreation time might be offered, 1 hour. An inmate is escorted by 2 guards in full tactical gear. They walk him through corridors with no windows, no contact with other inmates, into a concrete yard about the size of a small bedroom. There's no equipment. No basketball hoop. Just concrete walls, a small patch of sky, and razor wire. Some inmates exercise push ups sit ups, running in circles. Others just stand there, staring at the sky, memorizing clouds because it's the only thing that changes. Then back to the cell. Lunch comes through the food slot. Dinner comes through the food slot. The lights dim slightly around 9 p.m., but they never turn off completely. Sleep is difficult. The constant hum of surveillance. The knowledge that cameras are watching. The footsteps of guards echoing at random intervals. And this happens every single day. No variation. No surprises. No hope. But here's what most people don't understand. The isolation isn't just about keeping dangerous men locked up. It's a weapon. A form of control that breaks the human psyche. Former guard Marcus Williams, who worked at Goulburn for 7 years, told me something chilling. We don't have to beat these guys. We don't have to torture them physically. The building does it for us. The isolation is the punishment, and it's worse than any beating. Studies show that after just 15 days in solitary confinement, measurable brain damage begins. Hippocampus shrinks, cognitive function declines, and these men are locked up for years. Some have been in Goulburn Supermax for over a decade. What happens to a human brain after 10 years of this? The answer is horrifying. It deteriorates. Inmates develop what psychologists call prison dementia. They lose the ability to process complex thoughts. Their social skills evaporate. When they're finally released, if they're ever released, they can't function in the outside world. One study followed inmates released from long-term solitary confinement. Within 5 years, 60% were back in prison, not because they committed new crimes, but because they couldn't handle the sensory overload of normal life. The noise, the people, the choices. Their brains had been rewired for isolation, but here's the question nobody wants to answer. This justice, or is this revenge? When Ivan Milat tortured those backpackers, society was rightfully horrified. When Bassam Hamzy ordered murders from prison, we demanded action. When terrorists plot mass casualty attacks, we want them stopped. But does locking them in concrete boxes for decades actually make us safer? Or does it just make us feel better? Former Supreme Court Justice Michael Kirby called Goulburn Supermax a stain on Australia's human rights record. He argued that prolonged solitary confinement is torture, plain and simple. The United Nations agrees. In 2015, they issued guidelines stating that solitary confinement beyond 15 days constitutes cruel and unusual punishment. Australia ignored them, because here's the uncomfortable truth. We want these men to suffer. We want Ivan Milat to feel a fraction of what his victims felt. We want Bassam Hamzy to understand the pain he's caused. We want terrorists to rot in hell. And Goulburn Supermax gives us that. It's punishment in its purest form. But what if it's creating something worse? What if we're taking dangerous men and making them psychologically damaged, and stable, and even more dangerous? Former inmate Derek Wallace, who spent 3 years in Goulburn before being transferred, said this: "I went in angry. I came out broken. And broken men are more dangerous than angry men." Now let's talk about the people we never discuss, the guards. Working at Goulburn Supermax isn't a job. It's psychological warfare. Every day, guards walk into a building designed to break human beings, and they become part of that system. The turnover rate is staggering. Most guards last less than 2 years. The ones who stay longer, they carry scars you can't see. Former guard Sarah Chen described it like this: you start viewing inmates as less than human. You have to. Because if you see them as people, you can't do the job. And that changes you. It changed me. Guards at Goulburn deal with constant threats. Inmates throw feces through food slots. They spit. They threaten guards' families. They craft weapons from toothbrushes, from torn clothing, from anything they can find. In 2016, an inmate assaulted a guard with a makeshift shank during a cell inspection. The guard survived, but he never came back to work. PTSD. Nightmares. Panic attacks every time he heard a door slam. But physical violence isn't the worst part. It's the psychological manipulation. Inmates spend 23 hours a day studying their guards, learning their patterns, their weaknesses, their personal lives. Some guards have been blackmailed, others have been slowly corrupted. Bringing in contraband for inmates who've spent months befriending them, Bassam Hamzy is a master. At this, he's charming, polite. He'll ask about a guard's family, compliment their work, make them feel seen, and slowly, imperceptibly, he builds a relationship. Then he asks for a small favor, just a tiny thing. And when that guard complies, they're compromised. That's how phones get smuggled in, how messages get passed, how criminal empires run from inside Goulburn Supermax. The prison has protocols to prevent this. Guards are rotated frequently. They're forbidden from sharing personal information. They undergo regular psychological evaluations. But here's the reality. These guards are human, and humans aren't designed for this environment. Dr. Rebecca Foster, who counsels correctional officers, says PTSD rates among Supermax guards are comparable to combat veterans. Depression, anxiety, substance abuse, divorce rates through the roof. These men and women go home every night carrying the weight of what they've seen, Dr. Foster explained. They've watched human beings deteriorate, they've been threatened, they've been assaulted, and they can't talk about it because who understands? One guard, speaking anonymously, told me, I have nightmares about the sounds, the screaming, the banging on cell doors. Sometimes I wake up thinking I'm still there. My wife says I'm different now, harder, colder. She's not wrong. This is the hidden cost of Goulburn Supermax. It doesn't just break inmates, it breaks everyone who works there. Goulburn Supermax has faced wave after wave of legal challenges, human rights complaints, and public scrutiny. In 2019, inmates launched a class action lawsuit arguing that the conditions constituted torture. Their lawyers presented evidence, medical records showing deteriorating mental health, testimonies from psychologists, studies on the effects of prolonged isolation. The case dragged through courts for 2 years, and in the end, the prison won. The judge ruled that while the conditions were harsh, they were necessary for public safety. But here's what the ruling didn't address. Does it actually work? Recidivism studies show mixed results. Some inmates released from Goulburn never commit crimes again, because they're so psychologically damaged they can barely function. Others reoffend within months, more violent and unstable than before. The prison costs taxpayers $140,000 per inmate per year. That's nearly 4 times the cost of a regular maximum security facility. For 44 inmates, Australia spends over $6 million annually. Critics argue that money could be better spent on rehabilitation programs, mental health services, or education. Supporters argue that some people are beyond rehabilitation, and that's the core debate war. People like Ivan Milat, Bassam Hamzy, and Michael Caine salvageable. Do they deserve a chance at redemption? Or is society safer with them buried alive in concrete? Human rights organizations say yes, everyone deserves humane treatment. The families of victims say no, monsters don't deserve comfort. In 2020, Amnesty International released a scathing report calling Goulburn Supermax institutionalized cruelty. They documented cases of inmates held in isolation for over a decade, with no clear path to ever leaving. One inmate, who we'll call Prisoner X for legal reasons, has been in Goulburn since 2003. 22 years. He's now in his 60s. His lawyers argue he's no longer dangerous. That age and time have mellowed him. Prison officials disagree, citing his history of violence. So Prisoner X sits, and waits, and deteriorates. The Australian government's official position is clear: Goulburn Supermax is necessary. Public Safety Minister Jeff Lee stated in 2023, "These are the worst of the worst. We make no apologies for keeping dangerous criminals isolated from society and other inmates." But former Inmates tell a different story. Derek Wallace, who we mentioned earlier, was released in 2018 after serving 5 years in Goulburn. He'd been sent there for assaulting guards in a regular prison. When he got out, he struggled to adjust. Everything was too loud, too bright, too much, he said. I couldn't be around people. I'd panic in crowds. The psychologist said I had severe anxiety and PTSD from the isolation. Wallace now advocates for prison reform. He speaks at universities, telling students about what prolonged isolation does to the human mind. He's one of the lucky ones. He found purpose. Many don't. The suicide rate among former Goulburn inmates is unknown. The prison doesn't track them after release, but anecdotal evidence from lawyers and family members suggests it's high. One mother, whose son spent 7 years in Goulburn before being released, said he came out a ghost. He wouldn't talk, wouldn't eat properly, wouldn't sleep. 6 months after his release, he killed himself. The prison destroyed him. These stories don't make headlines. They don't generate outrage because the public doesn't sympathize with criminals. But they raise an uncomfortable question. If punishment destroys a person beyond repair, is it still justice? So where does this go from here? Goulburn Supermax isn't going anywhere. In fact, Australia is considering expanding it, adding more cells, housing more inmates. Because the problem isn't getting better, gang violence is rising, radicalization in prisons is increasing, organized crime continues to operate from behind bars, and the government's solution: more isolation, tighter security, longer sentences. But here's what experts warn: we're creating a generation of psychologically damaged inmates who will eventually be released. And when they are, they'll be more dangerous, more unstable, and more likely to reoffend. Professor Andrew Coyle, an international prison reform expert, visited Goulburn in 2021. His assessment was bleak. This facility represents the failure of the justice system. It admits that we can't rehabilitate these men, so we warehouse them, and in doing so, we guarantee they'll remain dangerous forever. Some countries are moving away from the Supermax model. Norway, famous for its humane prisons, has virtually no solitary confinement. Their recidivism rate is 20%. Australia's is over 50%. But Australia isn't Norway. The crimes committed by Goulburn's inmates are extreme. The risks are real. So we're stuck in a cycle. Dangerous inmates require extreme security. Extreme security creates psychological damage. Psychological damage makes inmates more dangerous. And the walls of Goulburn Supermax get thicker. There are no easy answers here, no clear solutions. What I can tell you is this: Goulburn Supermax is a mirror. It reflects how we, as a society, deal with evil. Do we try to fix it? Do we isolate it? Do we destroy it? For now, Australia has chosen isolation, and 44 men live in concrete boxes, their minds slowly unraveling, their humanity slipping away. Whether that makes us safer or just makes us feel better is a question we still haven't answered. Goulburn Supermax will remain Australia's darkest secret, a place where the worst men face the harshest punishment, where concrete walls and solitary confinement replace bars and cells. The inmates will continue their daily routines, eating alone, sleeping alone, existing in a twilight state between life and death. The guards will continue their shifts, carrying the psychological weight of working in hell, and society will continue debating whether this is justice or just revenge dressed up in legal language. What we know for certain is this: Goulburn Supermax works as intended. It keeps dangerous people locked away. It prevents escapes. It maintains control. But it also breaks human beings. It destroys minds. And it creates questions about who we are as a society. Are we defined by how we treat our best citizens, or by how we treat our worst? Inside Goulburn Supermax, 44 men know the answer. If this story shook you, you need to subscribe right now. We dive deep into the darkest corners of true crime, the cases that haunt you, the prisons that break people, the stories that mainstream media won't touch. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications, because next week, we're covering the Stanford prison experiment gone wrong in a real Australian jail, and what happened when guards were given too much power. Drop a comment below. Do you think Goulburn Supermax is necessary? Or is it torture? I want to hear your honest thoughts. And if you want more deep dives into maximum security prisons around the world, check out our video on ADX Florence in Colorado, America's version of Hell on Earth. Link in the description. Thanks for watching. This was a heavy one, I know. But these stories need to be told. I'll see you in the next video. Stay curious, stay questioning, and remember, the darkest places exist because we allow them to.